Hi, everybody. Barry McGuire here. So let me get my collar adjusted. Thank you. Yes, I'm not Donna. I'm Barry. This is the Monday main event. It is Barry McGuire's Creative Real Estate Education Series. But normally on Mondays, Donna leads. Today, I'm leading because Donna told me to. That's why. Donna told me to. We are today carrying on with some of our discussions with Neil and Rachel Oliver and with Wayne Hillier, all about rent to own. And so what have we done so far? On rent to own, in preparation for our focus workshop coming up on March the 6th. By the way, the early bird is ending quickly, Donna tells me. But in preparation for that, we wanted to talk about RTO in some depth. And so we've had a kind of a general overall discussion of some of the facets of RTO. We've talked about the win-win aspect of RTO. You know, we love to play for win-win. We really love to help people in our group. We insist on not taking advantage. And RTO is a creative strategy that really allows us to reach out and to help and to actually put win-win situations in place and feel good about yourself, feel good about what you're doing, and make some money. So today we're on the math side of it, the money side of it. What do the numbers tell us in rent to own? So I think we're going to look at RTO from the perspective of the tenant buyer. What does it mean to them? What about the investor? And what about the joint venture partner? If our investor gets a JV partner involved, and we're going to look at how RTO works in the classic tenant first rising market that the Olivers are experiencing in Ontario, and we're going to get some comment from Wayne Hillier on what RTO is like in Alberta, which is a flat to negative market, although prices and volume have been rising over the past year. It's been moving up. There's some talk that this is now the place to buy, and maybe we're going to have some price appreciation here, which will take us back into the more classic RTO situation. But we haven't been that way, and so Wayne's going to help us out about the flat to negative market math and what that looks like. So now we're going to bring in, to start with, Neil and Rachel, and then we're going to pop in Wayne, and we're going to get this discussion started all about math. So welcome, Neil and Rachel. And of course, there's Wayne, Mr. Guitar Guy.
Hey, thank you, Barry. Thanks, Wayne. Great to be here.
Hi, guys. Cheers from Costa Rica. In case you're wondering, this is not a green screen behind us. We are coming live to you from a beautiful place in Central America. And it's all because of the RTO cash flow.
Oh, now what a lead-in, Rachel, what a lead-in. The only reason we're down here having fun and able to do this safely amidst this COVID mess that we're in, because I know you guys are big on that, is because of COVID cash flow. Oh, that's great. I wish I would have thought of that. I would have told you to say it, but I didn't. So where do you think we should start on the math side? Math's very important. I mean, people have to know that they can make some money and can make the numbers work. So, Neil, you're the math guy in this group. Rachel's the pretty face. You're obviously not that. You know.
It takes two, Barry. It takes two. We both bring.
Okay. Wow.
We bring totally different perspectives. Even as we got ready for tonight's conversation, Neil and I had, in our traditional fashion, a disagreement and a slightly difference of opinion of how we should approach tonight's talk with respect to numbers. And I think we finally duked it out, and we're going to actually tag team this because there's kind of two sets of numbers. The primary numbers really relate to kind of two sets of people. There's the investor side, so the person that's actually acquiring the property, And of course, then there's the numbers that affect the tenant buyer, the people for whom you're solving a problem, the people who need the runway of the rent to own to build up a bigger down payment and fix their credit situation. So Neil will speak to the tenant buyer side, and I'll speak to the investor side. Now, we're obviously, in the interest of time, I know you guys are always saying time. We're not able to go into all of the nitty gritty of the numbers, and that's why we're going to be going into the numbers in a different forum. But today we will definitely cover kind of the high level. Does that make sense?
Oh, no, yes, it makes perfect sense. I mean, what we want people to do is get a flavor of how all of these aspects of RTO fit together. I mean, the only way we're going to dig down into the nitty gritty is on March the 6th at our all-day focus workshop. That's when we'll explore everything in more detail. But tonight, we can give them a flavor, I think. So carry on.
Okay, so we prepared a few visuals. So if we can just pop up some of those visuals, I can definitely kick things off for us.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so what we're looking at is essentially, actually there's one prior to this one. I just want to frame it. Do you have one prior to this one? Nope. Back more, back.
Back further than that. Some happy tenant buyers.
I don't. What's it look like?
It says RTO cash flow.
Ah.
I think you omitted it.
Well, you know what? We'll.
No worries. There you are.
Is that it?
Oh,
I'm sorry. It's my first time.
It's frozen. The cold weather.
That's okay. The beauty of doing it live, you can tell this is unscripted and unedited. So some fun things happening here, but really what I'm going to be kind of introducing is a deal that illustrates how you can make $977 per month on a typical rent-to-own deal. Nothing crazy. We're talking about a property purchase price under $500,000. So we're going to walk through some high-level numbers from the investor side, and then Neil will explain the tenant buyer side. So $977 a month cash flow. Just remember that. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so we are looking at a property in Midland. As you can see, it's a modest property. It's in a desirable area in Ontario, an affordable market. A lot of first-time home buyers, a lot of up-and-coming type of future would-be owners really covet this area. And this is obviously a resale. The purchase price on this property is $450,000. In this case, the tenant buyer has a down payment of $22,000. And this is what makes the rent-to-own strategy so unique and so risk-proof for those investors that are like my husband, Mr. No, don't want to take on the risk of a rental property. Here we have a tenant buyer who has $22,000 of their own money, and they're giving us that money in order to help them rent to own this property that they have picked. So our investment in this deal, once we factor in the 20% down payment, once we factor in Ontario, we have land transfer tax. In Ontario, we also have obviously some lawyer expenses, some appraisal costs. So once you factor all of those components in, the cash for us to be able to do this deal is about $87,875, and that's after we've accounted for the fact that the tenant buyer is giving us $22,000. And Neil will talk a little bit more about where that $22,000 is actually physically captured. But just for our purposes here, our investment in the deal essentially is $87,875 after we have already pocketed the $22,000 from the tenant buyer. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So we're going to do a little bit of math here. Nothing too crazy. I know it's late in the day on a Monday. So again, reiterating that the initial investment is $87,875. Now we want to kind of calculate, well, how are we going to make our return on investment with a property like this? So essentially, we're going to have profit come from two places. One place is the profit from the sale. So 3 years from now, we're going to be selling this property to these home buyers for a locked-in specific purchase price. Neil will talk about that number. But when you basically do the math at the end of the 3 years, we're going to see a capital gain of about $41,097. So over the next 3 years, we're going to be generating cash flow. And that cash flow is going to add up to $35,172. And if you take that from a monthly point of view, that's where we get the $977. So here we're looking kind of at the big chunks. So profit from sale in 3 years, then profit from cash flow over 3 years of $35,172. Combine that 41 and that 35, we get a total profit of $76,269. So when you compare that to what we put into the deal, so we tied up $87,875, we're pulling out a profit of $76,269. Annually, my estimated ROI in this type of a rent-to-own deal is about 29%. Now, a lot of people think that the profits in a typical rent-to-own deal hinge on the appreciation. So the more appreciation I charge to that tenant buyer, the more they pay me in the future, the higher my return on investment. And that's definitely one way of looking at it. But as we said, Barry, there are certain markets that don't allow for aggressive appreciation. And even in Ontario, Neil will talk about this a little bit more, we stick to a very conservative appreciation because we never know what the market is going to do. So the best place we like to uncover our profits is really by getting the best possible financing terms. So in this case, I'm running the numbers, the estimated profits are tied to my cost of borrowing. And my cost of borrowing in this case is actually 3% because that was the interest rate at the time on this property. And you can see it's still a super healthy rate of return. And if I were to do this deal today where I'm getting 1.8% interest rate, you can imagine what that's going to do to my cash flow and what that's going to do to my estimated ROI. All right.
Yes.
I think actually a couple of things to mention here. The $22,000 that the tenant buyer would be putting into the deal, it actually becomes part of the down payment that the investor would be purchasing the house with. So in that case, it's leverage. So it's about 4.8% roughly they're putting down, which means that the investor is really only coming in with about 15 and a bit percent of their own money. So rather than buying a house from scratch where you're paying the full 20%, you're actually improving your returns just by having a bigger down payment from the tenant buyer.
Right. So that's a really great point. A lot of the profitability with rent-to-owns doesn't really hinge on having, an aggressively appreciating upward market. A lot of the rate of return hinges on low cost of borrowing and extended amortization term. So 30-year amortization will give me higher cash flow per month than a 25-year amortization. So we always push for 30-year. And with 20% down, it's pretty easy to get. So low cost of borrowing, lengthier amortization, and the tenant buyer's down payment. That trifecta really is what drives a lot of the profitability with a deal like this.
So Rachel, for your estimated return on investment, your ROI of 29%, you take your total profit of 76,269, and are you dividing that by 3 over the 87,875, and that's 29% per year? Is that
Correct.
A per year figure we're doing?
It's per year, absolutely.
Okay, so why don't you just say that part as well? I want people to hear you say how you came to that 29% figure and that it's an annual number.
Yes, exactly. So essentially, you kind of look at the number that you put into the deal, and then Neil wants to. Okay, this is where Neil has superiority because he knows how to explain it better than I do. Go ahead, dear. I gave you a public acknowledgement.
It's really, really simple. You just take the profit, you divide it by the amount that you purchased the house for. That gives you your return. The profit, what's really important to note, and we're going to go into a lot more detail when we do the course, but the profit from sale includes many different factors. So you've got the principal pay down, you've got your mortgage repayment, you've got your legal to close the deal. In our case, there are fees included as well for managing these deals. That's something we'll talk about again on the course. But the other key thing here is also the credit, right? Because in a rent to own, one of the key components is building up the down payment for the tenant buyer. That's obviously one of the components of the cash flow monthly, but that's also factored in the profit for sale because we have to credit that money back towards their purchase. So that 41,000 removes everything that would need to be removed from that number. So that's as net as you're going to get. And then profit from cash flow, same thing. You've got your monthly cash flow from their credit, but you also have a little bit of buffer, right? You create a little bit of buffer just in case you need to increase insurance or you need to increase property taxes, because these are things that float from year to year potentially. So you want to make sure that you're covering that off as well. That is what makes up the cash flow component. So it's really important to note that it's not just as simple as, oh, hey, I made 41,000. There's definitely a lot of little things in the background that make up that number.
Yeah, we're factoring in what is the monthly payment to cover that mortgage on that property. We're looking at what are the property taxes, what is the property insurance, and in some cases, when we use a HELOC, there's interest that to service that monthly HELOC. So depending on what we have going on in terms of expenses, so you basically calculate your overall lease payment, which includes the down payment credit that Neil will be covering, and then minus the carrying costs that you incur each month, and that gives us that $977. And remember, the tenant buyer is responsible for all the maintenance and repairs. So that $977 after expenses is yours, or in this case, ours.
Yeah, that is yours. So this is kind of interesting. I want everybody to see that this return on investment number of 29% is based, as you already said, on financing of 3%. And so, if interest rates were going up, which reduces profit, there's still room in there to make a healthy profit, even if interest rates aren't 1.8 like they are right now, or 3, which they were when you did this deal, but we're at 4% or 4.5 or even 5. It's quite a bit of flexibility, doesn't it? Because of the inherent ability to make a profit on rent to own.
Yeah, and I think, you know what, Barry, one of the key components of the ROI that people tend to miss most of the times with rent to own is that there's no expense to you, right? So if you've done a full home inspection, you know what the issues are with that house. So does the tenant buyer. The tenant buyer is inheriting those issues. They will fix them. They will repair them. You've got to remember, we also want to make sure that they're driven to make this work. Right? It's not so much just about throwing them into a house and hoping that they cover off your expenses. You want to kind of lead them down the path to where they're actually going to want to succeed. So if they are able to improve the property, for example, and we've had people come in and put in new floors, new kitchens, this all, for me anyway, that's just an amazing experience to have a tenant buyer that looks after the property, because they're not going to fail. They've invested just not money into the deal, but they've invested their sweat, tears. They've made it their own, which I think is very, very powerful. And with the return, because you don't have to worry about a roof, a furnace, windows, all of those are either taken care of by the tenant buyer, or you already know that they're not going to need to be replaced due to the home inspection until that rent to own is over.
Those kinds of things happening. Not that we wish them on our tenant buyers, but for people who are committed to a property, every time a tenant buyer has to spend some money that they're really expecting, it just attaches them more vigorously to the property. So, and improves the property if by chance, which we certainly don't want to happen, if it came back to you. It's improving the whole investment. So that's another aspect that people have to think about. So, all right, back to you, Rachel.
Just to sum up kind of what Neil alluded to, why I think we really became so fixated on rent-owns is because we saw the value in having a tenant buyer who is not just financially committed because of the down payment component, but also they're emotionally committed because they've had a chance to pick the property or influence what that property is going to look like. If you're buying a property that is going to potentially be updated, if it's a fixer-upper. So there's a nuance of emotional connection and financial connection. And that's really the aspect of rent to owns that reduces the risk and makes it so much more rewarding as well.
Yeah, it's part of the global reason why RTO works so well is the emotional side. This is not just a a cold, hard financial calculation. There's a big emotional chunk to it, and we all know that is part of success in our creative real estate. So it's an important part.
Right. And that's probably a good place to segue to the next slide, where we can actually talk about the win-win on the tenant buyer side. So when we are looking at tenant buyers and qualifying them, determining what their budget is, we're definitely taking into account the current mortgage rules. So stress test is extremely important. But one of the things that I have found is that some people tend to forget that the stress test has to apply not just now, but also at the end of the 2, 3, or 4 year term. So we can't look at them today and say they can afford 400, put them into a $450,000 home and think, okay, well, hopefully they'll make some more income by the time that this rent to own is over, and they'll be able to qualify based on the affordability at that time. We don't know what that's going to look like. I mean, things could get tighter, things could get looser. We have no idea. So we're basing everything, and this is where, I'm extremely conservative, but, it's worked so far, where we look at what does their budget look like today and what's it going to look like 3 years from now. And it's really got more to do with the purchase price than it does the monthly payment. The monthly payment budget is really, it's taken into consideration. It takes into consideration the debts that they have, the debt load, car payments, that kind of thing, just to make sure that if they're taking on a $3,000 monthly payment, that we're not stretching their $4,000 a month income, if that makes sense. So in this situation, we were able to determine that this family, who makes well over $100,000 in household income, had very little debt. Unfortunately, they had a bankruptcy and they hadn't repaired their credit, which made them a really great candidate for rent to own. So in this case, the mortgage amount, which covers off the property tax and the home insurance, is $23.95. There's a little bit of buffer. Again, I did mention that we do account for the fact that house insurance can increase, and we've seen it happen more and more in the last year for sure, as well as property tax, right? Property tax could increase next year. We want to make sure we're accounting for that. Then we add in the down payment credit of $605. This is the amount that they pay each month that's going to build up their down payment. This is what's going to help them qualify for the mortgage at the end. That added together gets us our $3,000. And again, we're going to deep dive on this on March 6th. So I just want to make sure we give a high level right now. But the purchase price is kind of the key part here as well. And you can look at this in two ways. You can look at how do I maximize my return on this by, absolutely putting the appreciation at the highest level I possibly can. Or like I mentioned a few minutes ago, you can give them a little bit of a carrot. And we like to work with the carrot angle. So the carrot angle is we know that our investors are going to make anywhere from 25 to 35% return per year. And that is with a very conservative approach on the appreciation. But again, it also takes into account that we just don't know what next year is going to bring. We know that there's very little supply in the market, which is really driving the prices up. But we don't know that that's not going to change, and all of a sudden people won't be buying homes in the next year, and now appreciation goes from 10% down to 3%, again, being very conservative. So when we run these numbers, we find that the purchase price after 3 years is going to be $518,479. Remember, they bought it for $450,000. If you take a very simple 6% appreciation rate, that will mean the market value will actually be $535,957. So the equity that's sitting in the house for that tenant buyer is $17,478 at this particular, or in this particular case. That's a pretty big carrot for somebody who invested $22,000. They're almost making their money back as well in equity. And that is one of the reasons that, you end up having a high success rate, because they have something to work towards. Not only do they have a house, that's kind of, the known factor here is that they're going to own that home. Absolutely. But on top of that, they're going to have some built-in equity. And if we are able to, or if they're able to, I should say, improve the property, that equity can go from 17 quickly to 25 to 30,000. And as an investor, I know for us anyway, we're ecstatic when they're able to build up their equity, because I already know what I'm making. I know I'm selling this at 518, whether the market goes to 550 or goes to 510, we're going to find a way to make this work. But I know that when they have a little bit of equity in the deal, that they're really going to do everything they can to succeed. And we see it day in, day out. So that's really the crux of how you put together the win-win side. And obviously there's a lot more to it than just this, but from a simple overview perspective, to make $17,000, $18,000 just by living in a home that you wanted to live in, just by working towards owning a home, and just by looking after the home, those are all real good reasons that somebody would want to succeed in a rent-to-own.
All right, so that's an excellent excellent summary of how it looks from the tenant buyer side and how it looks from the investor side. I was just thinking about a client of mine who just sold a property, and we had to hold his sale proceeds in trust for a while we were working on some probate. And so I had $1 million. This house sold for just over $1 million. So I've got $1 million sitting in my trust account. And I said to myself, well, that money's going to be there for at least 30 days, maybe longer, could be 6 months. I better find out whether or not I can invest this money for my client and make him some dough while it has to sit. So we got in touch with our various lenders, and I think over 30 days he could make 0.1% on his money. And so it turned out it wasn't worthwhile to go through all the hoops that you have to jump through to invest $1 million. So that is something that if anybody's looking to invest money, now we haven't gone that route, and maybe that's the next slide we're getting to, which is this is fine from the investor side and from the tenant buyer side, but what about a joint venturer look-see at things? I mean, we've got a 29% ROI over 3 years in there. I mean, what do we say to our joint venture partners if we have to get them involved?
That's a great point. And more we're starting to see joint ventures forming around rent-to-owns. So one of the classic ones that I would like to introduce in this context is to take into account a lot of people who are trying to break into real estate investing, but they might not be able to qualify for financing, or they might not have money to put down. And they're kind of looking for an opportunity to start with zero money in. We've heard those types of scenarios before. Like, how do you make money in real estate without putting any money in or without qualifying for financing? So this is actually a really great example of a deal that allows for that. So in this case, this joint venture, if you will, could be a combination for 3 people. The first person is the deal finder. So what we represented here takes into account a deal finder who gets paid, not having to put cash down and not having to qualify for financing, but they actually get paid for putting the deal together. And then the other 2 partners, one partner would be the cash partner that would come in with the $87,000. And then the other partner would then have the capacity to qualify for a mortgage on a $450,000 purchase. So you take those 3 people, and essentially your deal finder already has money built in, because the numbers that we showed take into account that deal finder making money. So the 29% is now split between the cash partner and the mortgage partner, and they can do a split 50-50, which is a classic. That's the way we like to look at it. If I can't qualify for financing, I need a mortgage partner equally as much as they need my cash. So to me, it's a no-brainer. It's a win-win to do a 50-50, but I've heard many scenarios. I've heard people who come in with the cash get 60%, the people that get the mortgage qualification get 40%, and everything else under the sun in terms of splits. But what's interesting about this scenario is that the deal finder doesn't have to necessarily participate in that split. So it gives more cash flow opportunities to the other 2 partners. Or, of course, you can do it 33% per partner as well. Or the deal finder can still participate in the fee structure and be party to some of the returns.
Yeah, there are many different ways to break this out, and I know we're going to go and deep dive a little bit more on those on March 6th as well. But I mean, you've got multiple opportunities to joint venture with cash, with mortgage, with deal finders. Deal finders can be part of the deal and manage the deal all the way through and take a percentage. There's a whole pile of different ways you could break it out. And on March 6th, we'll break out more and more numbers so people can actually see physically what that's going to look like if that's the way they want to pursue a rent to own.
Well, that's what I'm really liking about this is that there is enough profit in this kind of a rent to own that you can divide it. But instead of one person doing it all and taking it all, you can divide it between a number of people, 2 or 3, and everybody is making a healthy profit. If I had my $1 million client and told him I could do something with his money like this, he would have, wow, that would have been great, instead of telling him, 0.1%. So that's, folks, you got to understand that in a rent to own, like Rachel and Neil have been telling us about, with that 29% ROI annually, there is room to organize and cut a number of different deals with the number of people that you want to get involved in the deal. So a lot of flexibility in that regard.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating, actually, Barry, if I can jump in real quickly, I'm working with somebody right now whose situation from an investor standpoint is not ideal in terms of getting approved at 3% or 1.8% or whatever the situation might be with the banks. He's looking at a B mortgage, putting 25% down, paying 1% fee. Then he's paying another brokerage fee on top of that. So, and his interest rate is 4.79. So he's not exactly dealing with the situation that we're actually talking about, where you can improve your numbers by having an amazing mortgage rate, right? But on top of that, he's still getting 16% once you factor in the fact that he's getting 4.79, he's putting 25% down, he's paying these fees, and on top of that, I probably should mention he's using a HELOC. So all of that still results in 16% return for him, which you're not going to find anywhere else once you start factoring in all these different expenses that he has to carry. So there is enough room in a rent to own, not just for joint ventures, but for people who don't think that they can qualify for an A mortgage. There's still opportunity on the B side. Mm-hmm. You just have to wait for the right deal to get to 14, 16, 18% return. And we've seen them all. So it definitely has enough it's the rent to own. Rent to own is the strategy that keeps giving. That's what we call it.
I like that. The strategy that keeps giving. I wonder, Wayne, do you think this is a good opportunity for you to jump in and have a bit of commentary on the quite different market that we have here in Alberta and that there are in some other areas of the country, Saskatchewan, Alberta? Well, do you want to pop in and have a word?
Very, very different. Very different. Yeah, because like you were mentioning, Edmonton's been slow and stale for some time, right? And we don't have the benefits of the appreciation. And I know the Olivers mentioned it earlier, but you don't always bank on the appreciation, but it is a bit of a fairly large portion of rent to own. You want to be able to add in that appreciation. Last 10 years, most of us, if you bought a property 10 years ago in Edmonton and Alberta, it's probably worth about the same right now. It's gone down a little bit, gone up a little bit. So a lot of people look at rent to own in Alberta and they think it just doesn't work because it's a flat market. You need to be able to have appreciation. I think it's actually a really terrific solution. And I've used it a bunch of times, and I've actually got 3 properties coming up in the next 4 months that I'm going to be advertising for rent to own as well. And the reason why I love it so much is that you guys mentioned repairs and maintenance. You guys mentioned, you didn't mention vacancies, right? When you have rental properties, there's a lot of costs that are associated with rental properties, just overhead expenses, normal wear and tear on your repair and maintenance, furnace servicing, duct cleaning, you got toilets, you got just everything. I mean, I had a washer go last week. We had a dishwasher leaking this week. Just constantly, there's always expenses. And when you've got a rent to own tenant buyer in there, I mean, they're responsible for the repairs and maintenance. That's a huge savings. Not to mention the fact that there's no vacancies. When you're dealing with tenants, rental properties, you get tenants moving every year, every 2 years, and that costs money. There's normally a month or 2 months to find a new tenant. So there's a lot of cost there. I like rent to own. Yeah, I'm not getting that the best possible return, but I'm getting tenant buyers who are taking care of these properties, and then they're actually going to buy them at the end. So I'm actually saving a lot of money on the expenses that I would normally incur on a rental property, because, you know, my tenants are eventually going to buy it. So I like it. And then obviously pairing it with other creative strategies as well, it's a huge bonus. Yeah, I mean, I really like rent to own, and it absolutely, in my opinion, it's a great solution for Alberta.
Well, thanks for that. Thanks for that, Wayne. And when we all get together on March the 6th, we will have a number of our other focus team leaders, Neil Taniguchi and Andrea Workington and Deb Kennedy and Wayne, of course, Wayne. They're all Alberta based, and so they'll have their own rent to own stories and how we've adapted the strategy to make it work for us and work quite nicely in Alberta, even though it's not the classic ultra profitable strategy that Neil and Rachel are employing with great vigor and with great volume in Ontario. So thanks for that, Wayne.
No worries.
Now, what other math things do we want to talk about today? You Olivers, what else should we be telling people about?
You talked about profits. You didn't talk about risks at all.
Risks? There's no risk. What are you talking about?
That's what I love about it, because the risk is so low.
Yeah, for me anyway, I think, Wayne, you're bang on with that. Like, and again, you know, you'll hear Rachel coin this the whole time that we're on March 6th, Mr. No. Too conservative, Mr. No. The reality is that's why I love rent to own. It's because, you know, the things that Wayne mentioned, there's no expenses. There's nothing to fix, nothing to repair. I've been doing this for 11 years. We've done close to 455, 460. And I manage pretty much all of them. I support the tenant buyers all the way through. I'm there to make sure that the investors have their concerns, replied to. We have not had, I think actually, no, I shouldn't say that. I think we've had 2 furnaces out of 460 that have gone while we've done the rent to own, and only 1 roof. Other than that, we've had only 2 insurance claims in all of that time. That's huge. You know, we just have all these stories from investors who are just sick and tired of fixing a roof, repairing a roof, replacing a roof. And it gets very costly, and it eats into that, you know, small monthly cash flow that they were making to begin with. But, you know, vacancy, yeah, I didn't touch on it simply because we've never had one. If somebody leaves the home because they can't move forward or something has happened, it's usually as a result of divorce, unfortunately. But usually that house is we either flip it into another rent to own. We've had no problem renting it because here we have such an active rental market, but we've been able to sell at a profit each and every time. Because again, sometimes these people have put some money into the property, and you want to give it back in some way. And we've been able to, you know, create different solutions around the problem. So, you know, sometimes they'll move out, we'll sell it, we'll give them back their down payment so that they're not stuck, you know, whatever, because there's still enough in there for everyone to make money on, you know, even when the situation goes south. So vacancies have never been a thing here at all. But yeah, I don't know. It's just the risk for me, there is no risk. You know.
So I just want to touch on one aspect of the cash flow. So one of the common misconceptions about rent to owns is that you have to charge really unfair inflated rent in order to generate the type of cash flow that a rent to own gives. So that example we looked at on a Midland property in Ontario was showing $977 a month in cash flow. And some people I know will be thinking, oh, they must be really ripping people off in terms of the rent. I get that one a lot. But I just want to set the record straight. A really strong rent to own that reduces risk for everyone and elevates the success rate for the tenant buyer is a rent to own that allows that home buyer to accumulate a very strong down payment credit. And when we got started back in 2009, a lot of the rent to own deals that we were seeing were really downplaying the necessity to help that tenant buyer build up a bigger down payment credit. They were like, at best charging, I don't know, $200, $250 a month as the down payment monthly credit. And that tenant buyer would then, at the end would accumulate maybe at best 5%, 6%. And Neil's approach was very unique. He kind of said, back in 2009, he said, you know what, I can't sleep at night knowing that at any moment those interest rates could change and the mortgage requirements can change. And yeah, today we can qualify with 0 down, and of course that went away. Then it went to, yeah, we can qualify with 5% down with perfect credit and perfect credit, perfect jobs, but that's going to go away too. So Neil's kind of Mr. No-isms was actually onto something. He says that's not going to be sustainable for the banks. They're going to change the lending rules. And what happens if they change the lending rules midway through the rent-to-owns that we're helping people do in the next 3 years? So I can't sleep at night. So I'm going to build them up to a 10% down payment credit. I'm going to insist that they come in today with 5, and then the balance of the other 5% they're going to build up through their monthly payments in our rent-to-owns. And that's how they're going to build up a strong down payment that's going to give them more strength in terms of their mortgage qualification at the end. And of course, it buffers our risk too, because the higher down payment they build up, and if they walk away, we're more secure as well. So it kind of buffered for them, it buffered for us. And Neil never wavered on this. So I have to give you a lot of credit. From day one, you saw that mortgage rules are going to continue to change and get more conservative, and that is actually the number one reason why, first of all, we have a successful track record with rent-to-owns, but more importantly, why we see such strong cash flow. Because a tenant buyer who's coming in with $22,000 has to build up that $22,000 to, double it. And how do they double it? By putting in more down payment credits each month. And the higher their down payment credit each month, the stronger their mortgage application at the end, but in turn, the stronger our cash flow. So we're not charging them unrealistic rent. We're actually enabling them to build up a bigger down payment. And in return, we reap the benefits of a higher cash flow. I hope that comes across as being a very important definitive distinction between how a proper rent-to-own is done versus how more of a predatory rent-to-own is done.
And first of all, can I just ask, Barry, is this being recorded? Because I'm going to need that video. That's never happened.
You got quite the highlight reel coming. She complimented you 2 or 3 times now.
I'm probably going to get slammed off camera, so that's okay.
Oh, no. No. The clip is already on the way to you, Neil. Don't worry. We'll break it down, and you can give her this compliment or that compliment, or put them all together. Remember when? I'm
going to edit that up.
Got you covered.
One last point to make that's really, really critical is that, yeah, the cash flow might be a little bit, it might seem high, and it's really not. I've seen way worse numbers from other sources that I couldn't believe. When I see them, I'm like, oh my God, like, don't do this. Please don't do this. If you're not going to work with us, that's okay. Just don't do that. It's really, really critical to, and I scrutinize and turn away more people than I work with. That's the bottom line, because they have to be able to afford what they need to earn and save over the time that they're in the rent-to-own. It's not enough for them to come in and make $200 or save $200, because the reality is these people can't do that on their own. They wouldn't be in this position if they could save 5, 10, 15% on their own, right? They need a system that's going to force them for savings to save that money, and then we credit it back. Again, the carrot. Right? The carrot's really a critical component of all of this. So it's really important to not just go out and willy-nilly make up a number. And this is a number, and they can't make that payment 3 months from now. It's got to make sense for their budget. It's got to make sense for the rent-to-own, and it's got to make sense for the investor. So as long as you're putting all those 3 things together, you should have no problem putting a win-win deal that everyone's going to be very happy with.
All right. So I just want to go back to risk a little bit. I know that tonight, we've been talking about RTO as really properly done with proper vetting of tenant buyers. It's a low risk strategy, but on March the 6th, we're not gonna gloss over that, folks. There certainly are risks to rent to own, just like there are risks in any creative strategy. And we'll be, as part of our March 6th presentation, we'll be talking about some of those risks and talking about the ways to reduce as much as you possibly can, so that it really does turn out to be a low risk strategy. But there are some risks, and we'll get into more detail on March the 6th. But I love that. I love the notion that that you're not just going to say and allow someone to pay $200 or $250 a month if at the end of the 3 years they're still short 2 or 3 or 4% on their down payment, because how are they going to accumulate that at the end when it's time to buy? unless they change their spots and they've been saving like crazy, they won't have that 3 or 4%. So, Neil, as you say, it's a forced and proper savings program that is a really absolutely important point of the math that will, at the end of the 3 years, go, okay, folks, as we said, there it all is. There's your 10%. There's your appreciation. There's your ability to qualify. And yes, we're closing. So that's important for everyone to hear, that we're, as part of win-win, we're, even if it's a little bit unpalatable, we're making sure that the math works for people and that these deals close at the end of 3 years, if that's the term, just like they're supposed to. So I like all this. I love it, actually. It's great. What else have we got? Anything else?
Joe
or
was
are we
actually
on to questions? Wayne?
Well, Joe was actually talking about, he brought up some of the rules that are required for CMHC, that you need to charge fair market rent, and then the options are on top of that. And then I just wanted to touch on that real quick, is that, this isn't something you can just kind of pick up and just write on a contract or get the contract from your friend. There are a lot of rules that are in place if you're going to be setting up your tenant buyer through CMHC. There are rules that you have to follow, otherwise they won't look at their application. And furthermore, I mean, you guys are talking about large payments and building up that large down payment. You were also talking about bankruptcy. In bankruptcy, some A lenders won't even touch someone who's been in bankruptcy before, even if it's past their, that grace period. So, there's a lot of things to consider, and that's why it's so important to take a course like this, is to get that information, so you don't set someone up in an option contract and then they can't succeed because you didn't know, right? So they're relying on you to set them up for success.
And that's a great point, Wayne. That's where the risk starts to come in.
I was just thinking that.
Right? If you don't qualify these people correctly and you don't run the numbers correctly, the risks are huge, because, I've had people call me saying, listen, I was in a rent to own, I lost $20,000. I'm like, well, why? Why did you lose it? He goes, well, because I was paying $5,000 a month on a $380,000 house, and I thought I could afford it, but 3 months in, I couldn't afford it anymore. I had to walk away. And I'm like, wow, who's doing this math, right? Like, even the tenant buyers not doing the math, not asking the right questions, right? That's sort of, I mean, we've talked about this before, but that's why we wrote the book. It's because there are so many people out there who just don't know what questions to ask and how to protect themselves. So it really falls back on now you doing the rent to own. You have to protect everyone, right?
We actually talk about the numbers in the book too.
So hold up that book again and read the title and read the authors, just in case people are having trouble seeing it. Oh, Rent to Own, Essential Guide for Home Buyers by, let's see, I just can't quite read those. What does it say? Oh, it's Neil and Rachel Oliver's book. Well done. Folks, this is a darn good book. But, to finish off on Wayne's point and Joe's point, there are rules. There's the rule, as Joe said, there's a bunch of other rules made by other people, not us making rules. Banks make rules, CMHC makes rules. Other people make rules that we have to follow, and that's one of the things that we do, is make sure that you know those rules and how to meet them, so that you don't get to the end of the deal and go, oops, didn't know about that one. So it's there's lots of moving parts to a successful rent to own. Now, we are getting a few questions here. I think maybe Neil and Rachel, we're ready to move over to questions if you're ready to move over to questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Wayne, I'll let you, as you always do, give us the questions. And Joe says, will you be sharing the contracts you use for all the different deal structures in your workshop? So, Joe, we do provide a number of different types of contracts. So we're going to give you as many contracts as we possibly can for as many situations as we can at the workshop. There'll be digital downloads for you, as many as we can possibly give you. Doug Robertson, who is the best attendee? Doug attends, he asks questions. I think you're not bored, are you, Doug? You're just interested in real estate. Couldn't be bored. Doug's interested in real estate. He really is. Do you ever do an upfront finder's fee and then all ROI goes to the investor at the end of the deal?
I can take that one. Yeah, absolutely. So, Doug, the numbers that we reviewed earlier today actually illustrate that exact scenario. So, there's a deal finder that gets their fee up front, and the ROI and the cash flow, so the capital gain and the profits from cash flow, go to the investor, provided that investor can qualify for financing on their own and come in with their own down payment. So, they would have that $87,000 over all of their own capital, and they have capacity to qualify for financing on a $450,000 purchase. They will get that 29% return on investment. They'll get the $977 cash flow in the deal finder. Makes a pretty decent, five-figure return.
So that just reiterates what you said before, is that RTO is very flexible on the setup side from the perspective of the investor or the joint venture or the finder. It has a ton of flexibility, and we'll go into more details on March the 6th. So that's that one. Doug, do you include the monthly option payment as cash flow?
Yes, absolutely we do, because you're getting the money. You're getting it that month. It goes into your bank. Yes, we have to credit it back at the end, but we credit it off of that future purchase price. It's not actually money that comes back out of your pocket. So it's kind of like if we were to give that money back, they would then give it to the bank. The bank would then give it back to you. So we just circumvent that little process. But that monthly option payment is definitely calculated as cash flow.
It's one of the beauties of the rent-to-own folks. When people give you money as part of the option, what they're doing is they're buying an option from you. They're buying the right to purchase for a particular price in a particular period of time. And so that's something you've sold to them, and you're going to live up to your end. They're paying you now. It's your money. Chunk of money that you get right at the beginning, and the monthly option payments, those are all your money. And so they certainly go to cash flow.
I hear it a lot, and I'm sure you guys do too, that you get a lot of tenant buyers who have this belief that their option money is supposed to go into an account and you're not supposed to touch it, which is a myth, right? Obviously. Yeah, absolutely. It's your money now, right?
Yeah, you can definitely, if you wanted to set it up that way, you could. You could earn interest on it. As long as you account for all of these details in the agreements, then there's no pushback, right? We make it very clear there is no interest paid on this money. So you're not going to earn any interest. If you don't want to do this deal, then don't do it. That's the reality. If you think that it shouldn't go to the investor who has put 20% down and your $600 has to go somewhere else, if those agreements aren't strong enough, then, that could be a problem for sure. But our agreements have been vetted, I don't know, 195 times by 500 times. I don't even know how many investors have taken it to their lawyers and how many tenant buyers have. And it's passed, I guess it's survived the test of time to this point. And we do get that question. Absolutely. Do we get it put into a trust account? No. Can we put our names, can we write, or what is it? I can't even think of the name right now. Sorry, drawing a blank. But
promissory note?
Well, kind of like a promissory note. Can we, sign the agreement off against the mortgage? No, you can't. And if you don't like these rules, don't do it. That's bottom line, right? Because our investors, they have to be protected as well.
Yeah, rent-to-own is not for everybody. Absolutely. You're not going to be able to solve a problem for everyone. And remember, at the end of the day, these buyers that are in the situation, they need you more than you need them. So they have to kind of go with the rules that you set out that make it worthwhile for you.
And there is the science to finding those people, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the beauties of it. It's something where you understand the strategy, you set up your own rules about how it works, because that's how it works, and then you're quite able calmly and reasonably to resist anybody who wants to come in and change what works into something that they have no idea if it works. So that's quite a comfort. It's great to be able to know in your heart that you're telling people exactly the way it is. This is not some made up scheme. This is something that over long experience, we know exactly how it works best. This is how it works best. And we truly hope that you'll look at it and feel that it's a place for you to participate in. But if those rules don't work for you, God love you. And we certainly wish you luck in your quest to find that dream home that we know you're looking for.
Yeah, we
And
offer
we're
a
all
lot.
calm about it.
Yeah, we offer a lot of flexibility within the program, certain
Mhm.
things that we can do with early buyouts and that kind of thing,
Mhm.
but we do not offer any flexibility on the process from the beginning.
Right.
This is how it's laid out. This is how it's going to work. This is what's going to work for you. And like you said, if you don't like it, don't do it. That's just the way it is.
Nicely. All right, Joe's got another question. Is your fee a set amount, percentage? Is your fee a set amount, percentage based on the home price, or how do you determine the fee amount?
So some people can, some deal finders can charge a fee that is based on a percentage. Absolutely. It really depends what your role is and what you're bringing to the table as the deal finder. So in our case, we charge a flat fee, but deal finders can structure the deals every which way they want. And we'll be covering that on March 6th as well.
All right, that was another good question by Joe.
I think another one from Doug. Where was it?
Can't find it because Doug has so many questions in there.
Yeah, there it is.
How do you facilitate clients who want to do improvements to properties? Oh, well, good one. Good one.
Yeah, we encourage it. And again, it offsets risk when they're investing money into the property. We do have guidelines in the agreements that outline what they can and can't do, where licensed professionals need to be involved, where structural engineers, because we've had people say, hey, what if I just knock the middle wall down? No. We need to go through process, and permits as well. So, they want to build a deck, we need to have a permit. We need to make sure if a permit's required, it's there. We go through the whole process in the agreements. It's very much outlined. And what happens is when you develop relationships with your tenant buyers, they communicate back. So I get people all the time emailing me saying, hey, I want to do this. What do you think? Oh, that's great. Go ahead. As long as we're using a licensed electrician, you can finish the basement. As long as you're not, trying to dig up the floor and run plumbing yourself, you can do the basement, right? So again, it comes back to, where's the risk lie? The risk lies in your agreements and your process and how you qualify people. So as long as you have very solid, rock solid process, rock solid agreements, the risk is very low.
All right. That's I get that question a lot when I'm helping folks with their rent to own. What do we let them do, and what do we say they can't? And obviously, after 450 plus deals, you're pretty much on to how you can help people improve the property and eliminate risk. So that was a great answer to that question. All right, I think we've come pretty much to the end of the questions and pretty much to the end of the kind of high level overview that we wanted to do on the math side of things. As Neil and Rachel said, there's a lot more to the math. There's spreadsheets involved. There's tons of different ways to look at these deals and to set them up. Lots of different ways to divide profit, different ways to present, different ways to work with finding investors and or other joint venture partners. I mean, there are a lot of moving parts to a successful rent to own business. But folks, I encourage you that if creative real estate is what you're looking to find out about, and if you want to get into a side of creative real estate where you can make some very good money and really, really help people, then you should be considering rent to own. And on March the 6th, as we said, we're doing a full day event with Neil and Rachel leading with 4 or 5 other focus team members. And we're going to go through rent to own from top to bottom, front to back, every aspect of it, the 7 steps that we like to go through, all the documents, digital downloads, panels, questions till you can't stand it anymore, all aimed at giving you the tools that you need to establish a successful rent-to-own business and move your creative real estate investing life forward. So the green screen is now the black screen, you guys, but it's still good. Still good. Well, thank you very much for showing up again and helping out. We're all looking forward to March the 6th. Wayne, I know you are. Neil and Rachel will Not sure where you guys are going to be. I mean, you might still be down there. That'd be fun, but maybe you're home.
If I
We'll
had it
find
my way, we'd still be down in Costa Rica, but I think we'll be back in Canada soon.
Probably be back. All right. Well, thanks again for showing up and doing your usual great job of explaining all this to all the interested parties. So we'll, Wayne, thanks to you. We'll sign off now and see you again next time, folks.